This episode of Return to Base is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee Company. Black Rifle Coffee Company is veteran-owned and serves premium coffee and content to people who love America. We already know that Black Rifle Coffee roasts the best Colombian and Brazilian beans on the planet in their facilities in Manchester, Tennessee, and Salt Lake City. But did you know that Black Rifle Coffee Company is on a mission to hire 10,000 veterans in the next 5 years? This is why I pick their coffee over others and drink it every time and everywhere, from bumping around in Humvees all the way to sitting here recording this podcast. Black Rifle Coffee Company is the real deal. They put up when others shut up. If you're ready to taste the freedom, go to blackriflecoffee.com/RTB and use coupon code RTB20 for 20% off your one-time order or coffee club membership. Hey, and while you're there, sign up for the coffee club. It's a subscription-based coffee experience. They'll send monthly shipments of coffee right to your door, so you never miss a fill-up of freedom. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Return to Base podcast. I'm Cliff, your host. Today we have an excellent guest. Josh Duntz is a former Navy EOD guy. So that means he looked for bombs and ordnance and blew them up. Cool stuff like that. And since he's gotten out of the military, he's done a couple things. But right now, what he's doing is he's a sales manager over there at Shift.org. Shift.org, of course, if you don't know, is a company that helps place or introduce veterans to tech companies or startups in the tech industry. So it is a really cool company doing a really cool cause, and can't be more excited than to have him on the podcast. Enjoy.
Bravo Zulu, this is Victor Lima. We are RTB. This is Return to Base, a VeteranLife podcast.
Hey, Josh, what's going on, man?
What's up, Cliff? How's it going, brother?
Going pretty good here. So you're in Florida, right?
Yep, down in South Florida. I'm just about an hour north of Miami in a little town called Boca Raton, for anyone who's familiar with the area.
Nice. You, that's East Coast. Is that right?
East Coast. Yep.
Yeah. Do you get on the waves a bit, or?
I try to. We're like in a weird spot right where I am, where we get a lot of the swells get blocked by the Bahamas. So right. We either have to go a little bit north or a little bit south, but yeah,
or try to get hurricane, right?
Yeah. Or wait for a hurricane. Exactly.
Yeah. I have family up in Jacksonville and in St. Augustine. And it seems like they get pretty good waves, better than I ever expected. I was like, what? How are you surfing in Florida?
Yeah. That's like the worst part about where I live is like literally 30 minutes north, like is not blocked by the Bahamian Islands. So it's like, it's everywhere but this little stretch of beach where I am. That's just in the perfect path of like any swells that are normally coming from the Atlantic, unless it's like a north to south swell, we get some good waves. But yeah, other than that, it's especially summertime, like we're not getting much, but that's typical everywhere.
Yeah. So interesting thing. So Josh is a Navy veteran, but I don't imagine you spent a lot of time on the water, considering you were a part of EOD. Right.
Yeah, I think I probably spent a cumulative time of maybe like 10 days on a ship the whole time. I was in the Navy for 10 years. So that's like a shock to most people. When I tell them I was in the Navy, they're like, oh, what kind of boat were you on or something? I was like, actually, try to explain the situation. But as you know, like unless you're a part of that community, it's kind of people expect what they see in movies and stuff,
Yeah, right. So the question is, how the hell do you find yourself on a boat?
So we actually, so the first team I was on was actually like a mine countermeasure team. So I was on like a dive team, basically. Oh, nice. And they have ships called MCMVs that basically go out and hunt for mines, and then EOD teams get attached to them. So they would go out, kind of run their radar, find some points that they thought were mine-like objects, and then we would actually go down and dive on them. So I spent a little bit of time on some of those ships during my first deployment. And then the only other time I was ever on a ship was when carriers come back from deployments. Before they come into port, they have to do an ammo offload and basically get rid of all their like missiles and like, major ammunitions that they have. So they'll fly out overboard. You'd be surprised, honestly, man. Like some super sketchy stuff was going on, but basically they'll fly out a team of EOD guys just to be on the ship in case anything goes wrong. But yes, there was like the first time I was like a new guy, the first time I went. So I'm on like the flight deck, and helicopters are picking up these huge crates of like missiles and stuff. And like, I see this helicopter lift off, get over the water. And then like the crate just like falls out of the sling. They didn't hook it up right into the ocean. And I was like, oh shit, that's going to suck. Like we have to go dive on that right now. And they're like, nah, it happens all the time. Like we just leave them. I was like, what? Like we just leave
deep part of the ocean.
Yeah. I was like, okay, well, I guess there's, probably a bunch of pretty cool shit down the bottom of the ocean somewhere. That's where all the
probably
aliens
do it
are.
all at the same spot, right?
Yeah. There's like some, I forget what like there was some like barrier, like it has to be so far offshore and stuff like that, because they do a lot of, not great stuff for the environment, I'm assuming. So
yeah. Corral that shit. Right. It's funny. I spent a little bit of time on a Navy base. You're probably familiar, San Clemente Island. One of my first trips after joining my team is we flew out to Southern California. I'm from San Diego, so it was kind of cool. And then flew over the water to San Clemente Island. And my team actually supported the dive team who parachuted in. And funny enough is in the channel between just maybe a mile or two off of San Clemente Island on the East Coast, though, just completely burned in an entire rib. And I was in the water, like on a boat beneath them. And we're like, whoa, man, that seems like we're missing a parachute. And you hear just slap. And we're like, a lot of sensitive items. And they're like, it's too deep. Nobody can ever get that stuff, man. I'm really being crushed right now. And I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, that was a miserable evening. Less for me than it was for them, because then they got to, I think, climb up a mountainside covered in cactus.
Oh yeah. I feel bad for whoever the rigger was that was responsible for that rip, because he probably got his ass handed to him.
Yeah. I don't feel bad for him. Come on.
Yeah.
We all make our own bed, man. We all pack our own chute too.
That's true.
I mean, some people. Excuse me. Jacob, cut that out. Some people do. Anyway, so what on earth did led you to becoming an EOD guy in the Navy? And everybody has different paths. It's always interesting to hear, like, where are you from? Were you an outstanding athlete or a complete loser in high school? How'd you end up in the military and tinkering with bombs?
Yeah. I grew up in Florida, kind of like moved around quite a bit as a kid. I think I went to like 8 or 9 different schools before high school. I say I grew up in the Clearwater, like Tampa area. That's where I went to high school and graduated from and joined the Navy from. So that was like where my formative years, I guess, as a child was spent. Definitely not like an amazing athlete by any chance, or I probably would have never joined the Navy, right? I would have been a professional athlete or played in college or something.
Yeah.
I played a bunch of sports growing up, played high school I and basketball. And then when I graduated high school, I went up to Tallahassee. I did not get it. I applied to Florida State, didn't get in, had a couple buddies that got into Florida State, and then a couple of us degenerates that didn't get in.
Just followed them along?
Just followed them to Tallahassee. And we went to the TCC, which is like the community college up there. Quickly realized at 18 that I wasn't in the mental headspace as far as like discipline wise to be on my own at that point.
No fucking way, man.
Yeah. Right. So probably a very similar path to a lot of people that end up in the military, right? Moved back home.
Kind of.
Didn't have the best like home life growing up. So as soon as I got back, I was like, all right, I can't stay here. Like I was looking for a way out, and I had a buddy of mine from high school that had recently joined the Navy. And I was kind of keeping in touch with him, and he was like, hey, there's this recruiter down the street, go talk to him, whatever.
There's the dungarees, right? You were like, dude, those dungarees look tight.
Well, so as a younger child, I have a bunch of family in Pensacola, which is where like the Blue Angels are from. So like I grew up, like me and my cousins every year in July, we would go watch the Blue Angel show in Pensacola. And that was like, a family tradition basically growing up. So we had all like, that was our dream, was to become like Blue Angel fighter pilots. And so literally like I walked into the Navy recruiter's office and I was like, I want to be a fucking fighter pilot, dude. And like I just remember like the recruiter just started to like laugh in my face basically, because I had like no idea what that entailed, right? I just dropped out of college. He was like, well, step one is you have to have a degree and like go back to school and all this shit. And I was like, all right, well, that's definitely not what I want to do. So like, I was like, so what are some other options? I knew a little bit enough about the military that I was like, I know there's a bunch of shitty jobs that I don't want. And so he handed me, like a SEAL packet, an EOD packet, a Navy diver. And then I think like rescue swimmer, which was like all the cool jobs the Navy has. And a couple of those are like suspect as far as like whether they're actually cool or not.
Rescue swimmer, man, that sounds sexy.
Sounds cool as fuck. Know a bunch of people that ended up going that route. Not very cool. They're basically like glorified helicopter maintenance people, from what I've been told.
Jesus.
So yeah, went back home and kind of like, I was actually proud of myself at this point for how young I was, and like did a ton of research into all the different paths, try to talk to a bunch of people that were SEALs, EOD guys, and like get the real scoop of like, hey, I can see what's in this pamphlet, but like, what's the real life, And what attracted me, I think, to EOD by going like the BUDS route was just, it seemed like EOD got to do a little bit of everything instead of just be a shooter, which was like really attractive to me. I grew up diving, like always around the water and stuff. So like that was really cool. Like, part of our pipeline is going to dive school and stuff like that. So, that sounded cool to me. Like, hey, I get to blow shit up. I get to dive, and I also get to shoot and jump out of planes and stuff like that. So that was kind of like what led me down to that path to go towards EOD. Yeah.
Right on, man. Yeah. And do you find that a lot of people suspect that EOD wasn't your first choice? I've met a lot of EOD guys who, for one reason or another were in BUDS and then became EOD. Yeah. Do you have to tell people like, no, dude, I wanted to be EOD, man?
Yeah, it's definitely like a thing.
Yeah, right.
Like when you show up to commands, it's like, all right, dude, like, are you a BUD stud or what? And then, for me, like, I went straight from boot camp to the EOD pipeline, never went to BUDS. So yeah, but that's like a kind of like an inside community joke for sure. It's like half of EOD techs are people that failed out of BUDS, and then EOD was their second choice and they decided to go. Very different pipelines as far as like EOD is much more of like an academic pipeline once you make it through dive school and stuff, whereas BUDS is obviously like very physically enticing or challenging for their pipeline. So yeah, it's interesting too. You see a lot of like BUDS duds that make it to EOD school and then just like can't hack it from like the academic standpoint too, just because it's like, it's so different from what they were signed up to do,
Yeah. I mean, isn't the only calculation you really need is like MSD divided by 2? I'm guessing.
Yeah. The hardest part about that pipeline is like, it's 10, like actual EOD school is 10 months long if you go straight start to finish. And it's just like death by PowerPoint for 10 months straight, dude, like learning about all these different types of ordinances and fuses and stuff.
The Navy has some cool fucking ordnance, by the way, like far and away blows away what the Army has.
And then you get to like your first command and you actually like, you're like, wow, all that shit was useless. Like, I'm not going to use any of that information in my real job, just because like, for most EOD techs, like you don't ever see real ordnance. Like it's all IEDs, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
that's right.
Like the other branches, like Army and Air Force, they work a lot on like ranges and stuff in the States. And like, they're the ones dealing with like US ordnance and stuff like that all the time. I don't think I ever even saw, like in a, you know, real world environment, like a piece of real ordnance that wasn't like an improvised explosive device.
A real piece of ordnance that wasn't being dropped into the ocean.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Tomahawk missile. Goodbye. Yes, that's super interesting, man. So 10 years in what year did you get to the Navy?
I went to boot camp in February of 2010, and then I got out in December of 2019.
Okay, cool. And in that time period, I imagine you got to see some pretty cool stuff. It's kind of on the tail end, obviously, of Iraq, Afghanistan was going on. Did you get to go to any of those beautiful locales, or did you experience the world some other way?
Yeah, no, I didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan. I did. My first deployment was to Bahrain on that dive team. We were there kind of when the big scare was like Iran was going to mine the Straits of Hormuz, which is like a huge shipping channel for the entire global economy. So that's why we were there. We were doing like a lot of exercises with partner nations as far as like, what do we do if they mine the Straits of Hormuz? And then the other two deployments I have, I was actually attached to an Army SF team, 7th group down in Destin, and we deployed to South America a couple of times and didn't do any.
That
Great deployments. I got super, lucky, I guess, depending on how you look. Obviously, like most people that join the jobs that we did, like you want to go to combat or like see that stuff. That wasn't the life's calling for me at the time, I guess. But, I had a great time doing what I did. I got to travel to a bunch of awesome places, do a lot of cool stuff that still most people never get to do. So I'm grateful with what I got out of the military. That was why I decided to get out, because after LARPing for 10 years straight, dude, I was like, all right, man, like I tried, like, I was supposed to be on all the cool teams, and the CRIF team with the Army guys, like that was supposed to be, the top tier stuff. Just wrong place, wrong time for me, I guess,
Yeah. Or right place, right time, right? When you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to a lot of us, where it's crazy. If you think about it, outside of, I don't know, like 2003 through 2008, sometimes it's hard to find people who actually deployed. And you're like, man, we had all these wars going on still. And it just seemed like they kept on picking from the same people. Believe me, we know all about that.
Well, like before we started this, you were talking about like mental health and stuff. And that was like a big challenge for me when I was getting out, honestly, is because like, you have this like imposter syndrome, right? Yeah. It's like, especially everyone you talk to, they're like, oh, you were Navy special operations, whatever. Like they put you in this bucket automatically. And that was like a challenge for me, because it was like at one point, one side of it, it's like, yes, like I was that, I deserve to, have that title, whatever. But the other side is like, I lost some buddies of like close friends of mine that actually like, went to war and like died for this country and like doing the same job that I was doing. So that was a challenge. It's still a challenge today. I think I'm super open about like my experience, because I've, I guess, matured to a point where it's like, hey, it is what it is at this point. And like you said, I know a ton of people that are still that have done a lot more time than me, that still never got the chance to go into a combat theater. So it's, it's all kind of luck of the draw, really, when it comes down to it. And again, it might be more lucky to not be in that experience as well too, so.
Yeah. One guy, I was deployed one time with a guy who was affectionately known as a bullet magnet, and we were all pretty excited about that. Because we were in combat, or in a combat zone, and we were doing a lot of fun stuff, but we were like, oh, right. We got John with us, and he always, like, people are always shooting at him. Let's get it on. He actually said, he was like, hey boys, listen, you could wish your ass into a firefight, but you can't wish your ass out of one.
Right.
And we're like, okay. That makes sense. And when I started to view the world from that perspective, I realized he's absolutely right. But also, nobody should be, yourself or anybody else should ever discredit your service because you did what your country asked you to do. And, there's such a variety of things that our country does ask us to do. Even the guys out there who are, let's say, stationed in Germany and don't ever get to go anywhere on deployment or anything. But they're in Germany. They want to be at war, but what they don't realize is, hey, their role is probably strategic, right? People want an aircraft carrier who never get to get off the aircraft carrier except a port of calls. They are a strategic arm, just as you were in the Strait of Hormuz. So we thank you for your service for that, man. And like you said, you could have drawn a completely different straw, and maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. So
very true. So, I appreciate it.
So getting fast forwarding a little bit to your 10 years of service and stuff, and on the tail end of it, what was the aha moment? You're like, you know what, I could do this for 10 more years, or I could just call it quits now.
Yeah, I was sitting outside of our Destin beach house while we were on deployment, attached to 7th Special Forces Group for the second time in Destin. On we did 2 4-month deployments, or it was really they called it a forward operating base, because we were on alert to go down to South America basically. And I'd seen some of my peers get out a couple years before me, and they were just doing really cool shit in the civilian sector. I was probably 25, 26 at the time. And that was kind of when I just kind of called it quits at that point. I was like, all right, man, I'm on this CRIF team. I'm still not getting to do what I've signed up to do from my perspective at the time. I was like, I gave it 10 years. Do I want to do this for another 10 years, taking the chance that I still might never get to go to combat? And so I decided hey, I'm done. This was probably 3 years before the end of my contract. So I knew pretty early on, I guess, compared to some people that decide 6 months before their contract ends, which ended up paying off tenfold for sure for me, where I had a ton of time to prep for my transition and take advantage of have a plan, which still didn't work out, as it never goes to plan. But I got to take advantage of a bunch of transition resources and groups and stuff. And, that network that I built over the past couple of years doing that definitely helped me, make a transition, be somewhat successful, I guess I would say, in my eyes. I was very fortunate compared to a lot of people that I see going through the transition, where it's either forced upon them, very late, where they don't have a lot of time to prep, or some people just don't think it's that serious, right? Don't realize how hard it can be. So they don't spend the time planning and coming up with a solid plan, so.
What was plan A?
So originally my plan was to get out. I got my bachelor's degree when I was on active duty. Thank you. Yeah. So my original plan was to go back to school and get an MBA. I kind of fell into the trap during my early stages of transition, where again, I was I saw all these people that I looked up to that had got out before me. And that was the route a lot of people that I looked up to were going. It was go get an MBA, go get a job as a consultant or on Wall Street or something like that. So I was I guess that's what I'm supposed to do to be successful, deep down, I knew it wasn't the right path for me, because I don't like traditional education. I love learning and I like reading and stuff, but it's on my time in the topics that I care about and I'm passionate about. Even getting my bachelor's degree online on active duty was just terrible. I hated it.
Where'd you go?
I was just University of Charleston, West Virginia.
Nice.
Yeah. I got some bullshit degree, like organizational leadership or something, you know what I mean? Like something I'll never use in my life.
Strategic solutions, man. Come on.
A check in the box, right? So yeah, like the more I started studying and prepping for like GMAT and like looking into all these MBA programs, decided that wasn't the route for me. So actually, when I got out, a couple months before I got out, I started my own company, like a health and wellness company that I ran full time for like 18 months, up until I got this job like 10 months ago at Shift. So that's what I'd been doing, up until I got the Shift job, which was my first like job in the private sector outside of the military. So yeah, it was an interesting journey from there to now. And then even like before I got the job at Shift, I went back down the MBA route. I got into down here in Miami. And then like, once I got accepted, the job opportunity came up from Shift, and I decided like, hey, I need to go take this job instead of go back to school. Yeah. So that's kind of like where I ended up now.
You said you got out in 2019. This is a pretty solid time to get out considering what happened in 2020, right?
Yeah, months literally.
Good plan, man.
I know. I got out like 4 months before the height of the pandemic. So it was a really interesting time to go through. It was a struggle, dude. Like that first, all of 2020 was the most stressful mental health, like time of my life by far, like without a doubt, like way worse than anything I dealt with like in the military or even like as a child. I left all my friends in Virginia Beach. I moved back to Florida. I didn't have a job. I like was burning through all my savings, trying to make my own startup work, by myself, like working, crazy hours just by myself, like trying to start your own company is super lonely for most people anyways.
A health and wellness company where you yourself aren't healthy.
Exactly. Well. Yeah. And so it was a struggle, man. Like getting the job at Shift was a huge turning point for me, from a mental health standpoint, for sure. Yeah. Just like having the reliability of like a paycheck coming in and like being around also another group of, a lot of our employees are veterans too. And the CEO, Mike, like he was a Navy EOD officer. He was actually my OIC. We went through the training pipeline together. So like I had that relationship and stuff. Yeah. So it was a big deal for me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And one thing to note is I myself, for instance, I went through the pandemic as a civilian. Actually, right before the pandemic, I got laid off. Our company just shut down the part of my company that I was working in. And I really liked that job. And then the pandemic hit, but I did 20 years, 1 month, 9 days in the military, and have a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. So I had a really heavy safety blanket. Whereas folks who transition out of the military prior to 20 years obviously don't, and I can't even imagine that level of stress. It's just something that is completely foreign to me, thankfully for me. But for you, it had to have been pretty significant to know like, oh shit, right? Like maybe I should have stayed in because that was a guaranteed paycheck. They were paying people in the military not to come to work.
I know, right? It was like, worst timing, right, to get out because like all my buddies were sitting in Virginia Beach, like bullshitting at the gym, like not working remote for the military. And I was like, what does that even mean, dude? Like,
fucking lifting weights.
Dude, it was an interesting time. I was also going through like a month before I got out of the military, I went through or started to go through my second divorce as well. So it was just like a shit show. Like timing wise, it was like I was getting out of the military. I didn't have a job. I was going through a divorce, like moving to a new state, leaving behind all my friends. It was just like a whirlwind of a bunch of bad shit all happening in my life at the same time.
Good times.
So it was good times, man. Like obviously like now looking back at it, I was like, hey, you build resilience when you go through stuff like that. And I've always seek stressful shit out in my life to be better prepared for stuff like that. But it was a big, like, eye-opening moment for me, just because I'd never felt that way before, like from a mental health standpoint. Right. I never got it. Like when people were like, oh, I'm so stressed out or I'm depressed, I was just like, it was hard for me to relate because I'd never gone through that personally myself. And then now having gone through that, I'm like, holy shit, like that's no joke. Like, I understand now where people are coming from when they talk to me about that stuff. So yeah,
I bet. And I think it puts you in a unique position to help veterans. For those of you who don't know, Shift.org helps members of the military. I'm going to read this here. So I didn't memorize this, which would have been super cool, but Shift.org helps members of the military, past and present, discover careers, acquire new skills, and embark upon new job experiences with the best companies in the world. Hope I didn't butcher that. Explain kind of, you mentioned you had a relationship with the CEO of Shift.org from your time in the military, but like what led you to consider Shift? And was it a passion for other veterans or what was it?
Yeah. When I started going through my transition process, I became like very heavily involved in like that, I guess, community or like the transition space, right? Like I had gone through the Honor Foundation, Tuck Next Step, Elite Meet, like all these, communities and networks for transitioning veterans. I helped start our own foundation for Navy EOD techs and Navy divers. So it was a personal, this was like, I felt like this was my way of giving back to the community because I didn't get to serve in combat. Right. So that was like a really important thing for me personally, like selfishly, I guess, is like, hey, this is my chance to kind of like feel like I was actually a part of it and like giving something to this community. So that played a huge factor in it. And then I just loved what Shift was doing. I loved Mike. Like I had a great time working for him when I was in the military. I thought he was a great leader. And it was also an easy thing for me to get into. Right. So I actually when I got out, I did a SkillBridge internship with one of Shift's partner companies, which was like a small, Series A startup out in San Francisco. That was my first experience, like working at a startup and working outside of the military, really, besides like bullshit high school jobs, But during that SkillBridge internship, I realized like, hey, I don't really give a fuck about what this company is building or the product or the mission. And I realized how important that was for me. Like, because if I realize like, hey, I don't care about what they're doing and that affects my performance at work because I don't care. So I'm not giving it like my best effort. Whereas
to the people who gave them a chance on the SkillBridge.
But they knew that, that's why I ended up not.
It wasn't where your passion was. And exactly. It wouldn't have benefited them to keep it.
Exactly. And with Shift, I was like, dude, it's so easy for me to get behind that mission, right? Like I want to help veterans transition. I want to help companies hire veterans. I know the product. Like I've done it myself. So like what better, and I'm in sales, right? So like who better would you want to do that than someone who's lived it and has a story to tell and can relate to both the candidates that we work with, as well as the companies that are hiring our candidates. So it was just a very natural transition and path for me to get into. And that was ultimately, why I decided to kind of pursue the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And so let's dive in a little bit more into Shift and in some of the things that it does. I know you mentioned SkillBridge. I didn't use Shift, but I kind of built my own SkillBridge when I was getting out with a startup out of Nashville called Havenlock, and founded by a former 160th pilot. And before that, I really didn't know anything about the SkillBridges, except, I think we traveled down very similar roads. I did Elite Meet and started getting real involved with networking, which is super important. But tell us about Shift.org's mission and how it was maybe when you started it and to how it's evolved to now.
Yeah. So Mike started it originally. It was like called Vet Tech Trek, where so Mike's background, like dude's just crazy, graduated from the Naval Academy, got his master's at Harvard, and then became a Navy EOD officer. And so when he got out of the Navy, he was having difficulties finding a job in tech, which was like blew my mind, right? Like with his background and stuff. And so he was like, well, shit, if I'm having an issue, imagine like my enlisted soldiers or like people that didn't go to an Ivy League school or the academy schools, how hard must it be for them to break into tech? And so that's kind of like where the original idea sparked from. So he started just like lining up these treks where he would get a bunch of military veterans. They would go visit like a tech startup in San Francisco. And it was kind of like a meet and greet from what I understand, just to like introduce recruiters and hiring managers into this new untapped talent pool that they weren't taking advantage of at the time. And it's evolved, quite like a few different times over the lifespan of Shift. The company's been around for 5 years now, I think. Originally, like when I went through and did my SkillBridge internship, they were kind of acting almost as like an agency would, right? So they would work like individually with candidates and companies, and a company would say, hey, we're looking for a project manager, and Shift would go out, find a candidate that they thought would be a good fit and kind of do that one-to-one matching. Whereas now we've evolved into, we've built our own software. We have a marketplace that it's like a SaaS product, right? That we sell subscriptions to companies, and then we feature military talent on that product spread out throughout sales, customer success, project management, software engineering, and data science, people ops and HR, typical roles, right? That you're going to find at a growing startup company. And it's just an easy way for those companies to source military talent from. And then part of that is, a subset of those candidates that we have are eligible for that SkillBridge program. And then where Shift is kind of like capitalize on the SkillBridge opportunity is like we have an umbrella agreement with the DoD where so any company that we partner with is automatically approved to to utilize SkillBridge interns, and then we handle kind of all the back end paperwork between the candidate and their military command. So the company doesn't have to work directly with the military. We're kind of like that middleman for them. Because as you and I know, like the SkillBridge process to get approved can be a shit show for both the candidate and the company. And then most of these like early stage technology companies that we work with don't have veterans on their team. So they don't know even how to start that process. And frankly, like they don't want to, they don't want to do that. They just want the candidates. So we made it just super easy for them to do that.
Right. No, that's pretty cool. And I love the evolution from the one-on-one to the marketplace. It seems like that's a really interesting way to go as a business model. And is the revenue generated primarily through the subscription model?
Yep. Yeah. So it's all like all of our services and programs are free for all of the candidates. And then we also that's our kind of B2B business. We also have some big contracts from AFWorks in the military for a program that we launched called Defense Ventures Program, which is actually cool. It's for active duty folks. So And so it's an immersion, like a technology immersion program. So we pair active duty service members with either early stage startups or venture capital firms, with the idea being that, hey, these active duty service members are going to go into these organizations and learn like what is the greatest technology and innovation that's going on right now in the private sector, and then bring that back into the military. We found out that like we're pretty behind the power curve compared to like China and some of our competition as far as like bridging that gap between the private sector and the DoD community. So this program was kind of stood up to hopefully bridge that gap. Super cool program for active duty folks.
No, absolutely. That's freaking cool. I had no idea about it until a little bit earlier when I was perusing the website. And so congratulations on that. And what is the best way really for a veteran who is getting out to connect with shift.org and maybe find out if even they're like, who are you looking for?
So definitely someone that's looking to get into technology, right? A candidate that's looking for one of those roles I mentioned, right? Sales, customer success, project management. If you're an engineer, like a data science person, or like people ops and HR, if you want to either break into one of those careers or actually right now, like 50% of the candidates that we actually work with are veterans that are already in the private sector and are just going through a career change, right? Where they're either looking to break into a new company or a new role. And they know they come back to Shift because they know that our partners are dedicated to hiring military talent, right? So they just want to be featured to those companies on our marketplace. So those are like the candidates that we're looking for. As far as like branch, enlisted, officer, we don't care. We try to mimic actually what you would see in like the active duty population. So like right now, I think, for the most part, 80% of our candidates are enlisted, 20% are officers. Most are probably like, junior enlisted that have 4 to 10 years of experience. We definitely work with, people retiring and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of like what our population would look like typically.
Right. And for the Shift candidates, or what do you call them? Members of Shift? For the Shift members who end up having a lot of success, what are some of the attributes or at least tips that can help somebody be successful? Because obviously Shift, I listen, I don't know this for sure, but I can probably guess that you're not going to like sign up for Shift and Shift's going to be like, by the way, we're going to find you a job, and you just sit back and then collect the paycheck. There's a lot of work to be done by the candidate.
Yeah, for sure. That starts off with like the application process, right? So that's like step one for the candidates to kind of get into that network or be featured on that marketplace. And then we have a lot of programs like designed for them to make them successful with that process. So like we have it's called Navigating Next. It's designed specifically for transitioning service members that don't know what they want to do next. Right. So it's like, that's hey, all these jobs sound cool, but I don't know where my background and skill set really line up into one of those careers. So that's kind of the outcome of that program is to help. Okay. Like, hey, what did you do as whatever your MOS was? Like, what were your day-to-day duties? What projects did you run? What kind of skills do you have? And then like, okay, let's look at where that lines up with one of these job functions. Like for me, for instance, like EOD, obviously there's no clear path into any one of those jobs. Right.
Yeah. Right. Do you guys need some like software you need to be destroyed? Maybe yeah. I could probably work on that.
But you start to like break down what most of us did on a day-to-day basis, and you can like start to see parallels, right? Like, okay, like what is a con-up? That's a pitch deck, right? You're pitching that to leadership to get them to approve you to go on this mission. Kind of what I'm doing on sales calls, right? Like I have a pitch deck, I'm pitching this idea to you. Like, obviously all of us work like pretty collaboratively across different organizations, even countries, different, special forces groups, whatever. So that's a huge benefit to companies, like a lot of, especially these startups, right? Where they've typically been in this kind of bucket where they get their talent from the same place all the time. Now you see all these huge, like, DEI initiatives from these companies where they want to hire diverse talent because we know that's what breeds great organizations. Frankly, that's why the military is like successful, so great, right? Yeah. It's
not as homogenous as people want to think.
It's the most diverse organization in the world. And that's like one of our value props of like why we think companies should hire military veterans, right? It's like, I think 43% of veterans come from another underrepresented background on top of being a veteran, as a diversity standpoint too. And then just like the resilience, the adaptability, all those things that as a veteran you take inherently because that's what you did on a day-to-day basis, that's not very common in the private sector, right? Like most people that took a traditional path and went from high school to college to the private sector, like they haven't dealt, I'm obviously speaking like specific,
I got you.
In general, like most people didn't deal with the same kind of like hardships or whatever stressful environments that you did in the day-to-day military. That's really attractive attributes to small growing startups who want people that can come in, get behind a mission and take action and don't need someone to hold their hands every step of the way, or someone that's going to like come up to a roadblock and then ask 1,000 questions. They want someone that can like work through that and just figure out, hey, this is point Z where I want you to go. I don't care how you get there. Just go do that. That's uncommon for people to find that type of attributes, and is very common in the military. So people don't realize like how marketable you are to these startups. You just have to be able to confidently tell that story. And that's where a lot of veterans struggle. And that's where we try to come in and help out with kind of building that persona, building that LinkedIn presence, building that resume, having that elevator pitch, having talking points for you during the interview where you can start to connect that gaps. Because, if you look at a typical veteran resume, it's like to someone in the private sector, it means nothing. It's a bunch of hogwash. But when you can start to dissect that and like use the language that they're used to hearing, you become very attractable very fast to some of these companies.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So it's basically translating a buzzword, soft skills, that are just very, very hard to define sometimes. And I like what you said about the military veterans are different, especially, listen, we all know like not all the military is super great. There's a lot of people who, don't do shit and didn't do shit even to get in, right? Like sometimes their basic training, all the training is easy, but there is a lot of people who do a lot. And the fact is probably 85% of the military has, on purpose, made themselves uncomfortable. Right. And the conversely, I think in the private sector civilians, at least nowhere near the same percentage of people have purposefully made themselves uncomfortable, right? Nobody's ever been hungry. Okay. Nobody's ever really been so tired that they could possibly die, right? On purpose. Right. And it's just like it's a weird community to draw from. And the fact that veterans are so underrepresented in tech still is a little bit alarming. So, so I got out a couple of years ago myself, veteran, 20 years, special forces, MBA grad, and it presents the same challenge. I have no idea what I want to do. And even though I've talked to a lot of people about it, I don't really even know how to tell you what I want. And I entered like my first few job interviews with like, what is it you got? Like, what do you want to do? What do you have? Tell me what you have. And I could, luckily somebody took a chance on me because I interviewed with a company and my boss was just like, I don't know what we're going to have you do, but we want you on board. And I was like, oh, thank God. But yeah, it just goes to show like, it doesn't matter where people come from or even what their pedigree is. It's just hard to talk about yourself and not make it sound like you're writing your own evaluation report. Right. Yeah. So I'm super glad that folks like you who are out there and Shift.org are helping in that regard. I'd like to also talk about, so your title is sales manager. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? do you do in sales? This seems like an easy question to a lot of people out there. If you're listening, they're probably like, we know what sales is. They sell things, right? But it's more complicated than that, obviously. Can you tell us a little bit about like your daily responsibilities and kind of what led up to that?
Yeah. So I started off as an account executive, which is kind of like entry level sales, I would say. We didn't have a BDR organization when I started as an account executive.
BDR, explain BDR.
Business development representative. So that's like, I guess, like really entry level sales. Mm-hmm. Those are typically the positions within companies that are responsible for sourcing opportunities for top of the funnel creation for account executives. And then account executives are typically like the closer. So, a BDR would introduce them to a prospect, and account executive would kind of take over the sales process from them and hopefully close that account to become a new customer. So when I started, I was doing the full sales process. So prospecting, discovery, and then demo and closing. And then just recently, we've kind of really scaled our sales team. So now we have a really cool BDR program that we actually have like SkillBridge people doing, military spouses. So we're basically building our own internal pipeline for our sales team. And so when we kind of kicked that off, we actually promoted the first couple BDRs from our first cohort of that to account executives recently, about a month ago. Nice. And so I took the sales manager position now, where I'm managing a small team of account executives and still also like maintaining my own quota as an individual rep as well too. So that's kind of like my weeks are typically split. How I've done it is like Monday and Friday are kind of my team days, where I kind of, knock out everything I need to do for my team. We have a lot of team meetings and stuff like that. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays are kind of my personal pipeline days, where I'm, on the phone with prospects or doing demo calls, closing deals, like whatever kind of a day-to-day of the actual sales position does. So that's kind of how I've broken down my week.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does actually pretty perfectly actually. And the product that you're selling is pretty unique. You're selling, you're selling an intermediate to a product, right? Because the product is the veteran itself, and the intermediate would be your software, your platform, marketplace. Right. And I can't imagine that your close rate is 100%. So what are the things holding back tech companies from putting down their subscription fee and signing a contract?
Yeah, it's typically just an education gap, I think, on recruiters and hiring managers and leadership, because it really takes kind of like a top down and bottom up strategic initiative to make like a veteran hiring strategy work, right? You have to have buy-in from not only the recruiters to source the candidates, you have to have buy-in from the hiring managers to interview the candidates. And then typically you have to have buy-in and action from the leadership to make this a company-wide initiative and put metrics to it. Mm-hmm. So those are the companies we see most successful, is like, hey, this is actually an initiative that leadership has put out, and they put metrics to it. A lot of companies say, yeah, I want a diverse workforce. I want to hire more diverse talent. And that's as far as it goes. It's like, it's words, but it's hard to put words into action if you don't tie data to that, right? It's like, hey, we're 5% of our workforce by 2023 is going to be veterans. Like, okay, now we can make a plan to make that happen. So the problem is that the biggest problem I see with companies that don't get it, right, is they don't understand veteran talent. They don't understand the soft skills that veterans bring to organizations. They're looking for that box. They're looking to put candidates in this box that they've built, right? Where it's, hey, you need 3 to 5 years of industry experience, or you needed crypto experience, if it's a Web3 company, something like that. Right. And it's like, what we found is actually, the good companies can easily train people on all the hard skills that you need, the technology, like, okay, hey, a veteran's not going to have 3 years of Salesforce experience coming out of the military, right? Like, it's just, you don't have it because it's not something we use in the military. But how hard is it to teach someone how to use Salesforce? Like, right, you could do it in a day. I learned how to use our entire technology stack, in the first month of being at Shift. I came in as an account executive with 0 sales experience, like ever in my life. And 10 months later, like now I'm leading a team of salespeople, right? So it's like, it's not rocket science. It's those soft skills are much more important than the hard skills, because the hard skills are easily be taught and trainable. And especially as a veteran, like, you're so used to learning new stuff all the time, because typically your job's constantly changing. So it's not new to you. Like, you can come in and learn stuff very easily, especially from a technology standpoint. Like, my job was a little more technical than some jobs in the military, just because we dealt a lot with like robots, and we were using software and drones and all that stuff. But again, none of this stuff is like rocket science, right? Like, you don't need to go to Stanford and
military people these things.
Yeah. And so like, that's what we found is like the most successful, the companies that get it are like, oh yeah, like, we can easily train someone on that. We actually care more about those soft skills, right? Like, we want someone that's personable, that has good communication skills, that can tell a good story, that has grit, resilience, right? Like, these startups, especially now with the economy and kind of the world we're living in now, like, a lot of these companies are in a very stressful situation where, like you said, civilians haven't operated in that environment. For veterans, it's like, oh, dude, like, okay, the economy's down, like, is that all you got for me? Like, what I mean? That's like, it's not a huge stressor to where it's going to affect their performance. If anything, they might perform better than they normally would. Right. So, those are the companies that are like super easy to sell to, and that like understand it, because they're actively looking for people that are outside of that box that a lot of companies are trying to place candidates into.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we're right about at time. So I'll give you the last word as to how people can find Shift.org and any advice you have to people considering getting out.
Yeah. So Shift.org, obviously go to the website. Happy to connect with people individually too, if they have questions about transition or want to know if like Shift is the right path, or want to talk about any other transition resources we have. Again, this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And so as much as I can give back to the community I want to, they can find me on LinkedIn, or I can give you my email address. Happy to chat with anyone that wants to learn more. As far as like a piece of advice, I would say the hardest thing probably for most people is discovering your own path, and like realizing like, hey, just because your peer group or people you look up to are doing a certain thing, that doesn't mean that's the right path for you as an individual. We're all very different creatures. We all have different things that, we're passionate about and we want to do. So don't be afraid to carve your own path and go the non-traditional route, even though if you don't see other people that look like you or act like you doing that. That's been the biggest thing I think that I've learned is like, hey, I know I'm different than everyone, and I'm going to carve my own path. And that might piss some people off or whatever, but like, that's the world we live in. Right. And then the second piece is, you mentioned this earlier, is like, I can't stress this enough, how important it is to spend as much time and dedicate as much time you can to that transition, right? Like, as early as you can start the process, take advantage of it. Then your network is everything. That was something that you don't really learn in the military, right? It's like how important those friends and those connections can be. every opportunity I've had in the private sector has come from my network and people that I know and trust. And like, I just see that getting exponentially bigger the longer I've been in the private sector. So I can't stress that enough. Like, start to build your network, realize that those relationships and those people that you have that care about you, those are going to be the people that are going to open up doors and opportunities for you when you're getting out of the military. So, value those relationships and treat them as such.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man with the busy schedule and stuff. So thank you very much for coming on the Return to Base podcast.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. So that is a wrap for this episode of the Return to Base podcast. Thank you to Josh Duntz of Shift.org, not just for joining us on the podcast, but for what they are doing for the veteran community, getting veterans in those tech world jobs that are really cool, but sometimes hard to break into. It's really important work that they're doing, and I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more, you can visit Josh's LinkedIn. That's going to be in the show notes. And you could also go to shift.org, SHIFT.org. And hey, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, now's a great time to do it. You know where to find us. You're already listening to us. Might as well subscribe. Get updates when we post new content. Until next time, take it easy.